Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Saṅghāṃ Namasāmi. So, dear Dhamma friends, the first thing I would like to ask all of you is to reflect, to think, what is the greatest treasure we have here in this country, in Sri Lanka? What is the greatest treasure? And is it Sri Dalada Maligawa in the Temple of the Tooth in Mahanura, in Kandy? Is that the greatest treasure? Or is Sri Mahabodhi in Anuradhapura the greatest treasure? Or is Ruanweli Saya in the great Chaitya, the great stupa in Anuradhapura, is that the greatest treasure? Or is Galvihara in Polonnaruwa, so beautiful? The Buddha statues, the Buddha Pilama, they're so beautiful. Is that the greatest treasure? So I ask you that, just to reflect for a moment. And of course, my answer is no, they're not the greatest treasures. Of course, they're all very precious and very important, especially the Sri Dalada. But the greatest treasure, the most precious thing, what is that? It's the Dhamma. The Dhamma we have received from the Lord Buddha. It's the Dhamma that we've received from the Arahant Mahinda. This is the most important, precious thing that we have received here in this country, that has been preserved in this country for such a long time. And why is it the greatest treasure? Because it takes us out of darkness, out of the darkness of ignorance. It gives us understanding of this world and samsara. And it means that we can find the way to happiness and peace, a lasting happiness and peace, and go beyond the sufferings of samsara. So it's very important because it shows us how to live. The Dhamma is a very practical thing that the Buddha and the Arahant Mahinda have given us. Very practical. And of course, we know, everyone knows in this country to whom we owe a big debt for bringing the Dharma here to Sri Lanka. And of course, that's the Arahant Mahinda, isn't it? Yes. I think most people will know. Those people that are not in Sri Lanka may not know. The Arahant Mahinda was the son of the Emperor Asoka in India. And he came here to Sri Lanka, they say about 260, 255 BC. And sometimes in Sri Lanka, it's very interesting, they call the Arahant Mahinda the second Buddha because he brought the teachings and made them available. But what he did in his time in here, in his life here, is extraordinary, because not only did he establish the Bhikkhu Sangha, this is the monks, and he ordained many of the royal family, but first the King Deva, Nampiyatissa's nephew, Arita, he ordained him as a Buddhist monk. So the Sangha, the monk Sangha, the Bhikshu Sangha started. But not only that, he established the Bhikshuni Sangha in Sri Lanka when he invited his sister, also an Arahant, Sangamita, to come to Sri Lanka. So she established the Bhikshuni Sangha. But she also brought with her a very, very precious thing, the cutting of the Bodhi tree, the Sri Mahabodhi from India. So this, of course, was planted in Anuradhapura. So incredible what he gave to Sri Lanka, what he brought to Sri Lanka. And it's very interesting for me, I just say this because I think most Sri Lankans know it, but I think it's a fantastic story, is the intelligence test that the Arahant Mahinda gave the king, King Deva Nampiyatissa. He was on a hunting expedition, they say, and he met the Arahant Mahinda. And then the Arahant Mahinda, just to gauge, what level the king's intelligence was at, his also I think level of interest too. I gave him the first recorded intelligence test in history, when he gave this sort of puzzle, and it's a very nice teaching. I call it. It has been called actually mango wisdom. Everybody knows what I'm going to talk about now, but I love this story because he asked the king, what is this tree, pointing at a mango tree, an umber tree, umbergahak, and the king quite rightly identified it as a mango tree. And then he asked the king, are there any other mango trees besides this one? And the king said, yes, of course there are other mango trees besides this one. And then he asked the king, are there any other trees besides this mango tree and the other mango trees? And the king said, of course there are. There are many different types of trees. And then the king asked him the real trick question, didn't he? He said, are there any other trees besides these other trees and these other mango trees? And the king was paying enough attention, enough interest, that he said, yes, this mango tree that he'd identified when he first started. So he was on the ball, and he was paying attention. And the king could see, the Arahant Mahinda could see this person, had the ability to learn from the Dhamma. Also, it gave him an idea of what he could teach. I often reflect, what would have happened if the king had got it wrong? He hadn't got the correct answer. Would the Arahant Mahinda say, that's it, finished, I'm going back to India? But no, he would have probably found a simpler teaching, a teaching that would be more appropriate. That's what I would think. So for Poson Poya, which is coming, we can reflect on the huge debt we have to the Arahant Mahinda. It's not only Sri Lanka, it's not only this country, it's of course the whole world, because the Dhamma that was preserved here, that was practiced here, has been made available throughout the world, particularly in the Theravada countries of Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, those places. So this is and on Poson Poya Day, we can feel a lot of joy, priti, for this gift. This is a most precious gift. And not only this priti, this joy, for something very, very special, something life-changing, but also gratitude, katanyuta, that we received the Dhamma, something very, very important for us. And throughout Poson Poya, I'd like to encourage people to do a meditation, a visualization, where they bring to mind the Arahant Mahinda. We don't actually know what he looked like, I'm sure. You can have an idea, though. And in our mind, throughout the day, just bring up the feeling of gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. Just use that as a mantra for the day. And this will bring a lot of priti, a lot of joy to us, which is a very good foundation for developing the bhavana, because the happiness of the mind is so essential for developing our meditation. So how do we repay, show our respect to, and repay the Arahant Mahinda? How can we do it? I mean, he's given such an incredible gift. And of course, the very best puja we can give to the Arahant Mahinda is to practice what he gave us, to practice what the Buddha gave him. And it's by practicing that we really honor a teacher. This is what the Buddha himself said in the Parinibbana Sutra. It's very nice to have incense, candles and flowers offered, but it's the practice, to see one's disciples practicing and realizing the benefits, that is the great benefit, the great happiness for teachers. So I'd like to give some verses from the Theragatha, also in the Jataka. You probably all know these verses, they're very famous. And it's Dhammo have rakati, Dhammacharing, Dhammasuchino, Sukhamavahati, Esa nisangso, Dhamme suchine, Nadugating gacchati, Dhammachari, Nahi Dhammo adammo, Cha ubo samavipakino, Adammo nirayang eti Dhammo papeti sugating. Sadhu, 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 sadhu. So this is a saying of the Buddha that's in the, as I mentioned, in the Theragatha and attributed to the Venerable Dhammika, but also in the Jatakas, in the Jataka about the Iron House Bodhisattva. And what it means, as you probably, many of you already know, I'm sure, the Dhamma protects the one who lives by the Dhamma, who practices the Dhamma. The Dhamma, well practiced, brings happiness, that's for sure. And he who lives by the Dhamma does not go to a bad destination. Therefore, the Dhamma and the false Dhamma do not have the same result. Adhammo nirayang neti. False Dhamma leads to the lower regions, lower realms. The Dhamma causes one to attain a happy state. So this is part of the purpose of practicing the Dhamma. And of course, when we practice the Dhamma, it's not only for our rebirth. Many people don't believe in rebirth. It's for happiness here and now. And we can see that in our own lives. So this is very pointing to the importance that if we practice the Dhamma, it will protect us. And that is so essential, so important. Particularly in times like these, times when there are troubles. If we practice the Dhamma, it will protect us. Because if we're developing the kusala, if we're doing kusala karma, the vipaka will be kusala. If we are doing akusala karma, the vipaka has to be negative. So we need to do as many wholesome things as possible. So how do we practice Dhamma in the right way? And I'll just mention a few, as you would imagine, the main ways, and then I will go on to the Arahant Mahinda's first teaching. We practice the Dhamma, of course, by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, the Arihastanga Magga. This is the path to liberation. This is the path to happiness. And in its entirety, all factors. So this, of course, is right view, right intention or right motivation, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi. We need all those factors to practice, to develop the path, and they will lead to our happiness and well-being. Another way of putting this is dana sila bhavana. But when I say dana sila bhavana, dana is any type of giving, all types of giving and sharing, not just a dana to monks and nuns. That's too limited. And when we practice dana to everyone, giving to everyone, it brings happiness, which we can use for our practice, for our daily life, for the happiness that's necessary for meditation. So this is very important. Dana, sila, absolutely important. The way we talk and act in this world is very important. Not only for our future lives, but our present lives, we see the results. And bhavana, purifying the mind of the negative aspects, particularly through our meditation. Another way of viewing that is sila, samadhi, and panya, of course. And sila, of course, is ethical conduct or moral conduct. Samadhi is steadiness of mind, stillness of mind, and one-pointedness of mind, and panya, wisdom. But I'd ask you all, I think this is a good quiz, it'll keep you awake too. What was the first teaching that the Arahant Mahinda gave? What was the first teaching that he gave? I think most people will know the answer, I hope they would, is the Chula Hattipadoma Sutra. And in English this translates as the shorter discourse on the simile of the elephant's foot. And you know, I reflect when I read the sutra, which I have many times, is why did the Arahant Mahinda teach that? Why did he choose that teaching? And it's very obvious when you see it that the whole point of this sutra, and the Buddha mentions it again and again, is to verify. How can we know? How can we know that the Buddha is fully enlightened, the Dhamma is well proclaimed, that the Sangha is practicing the good way? How can we know? So this is for the king and for people who are not Buddhists. How can they find out if the Buddha was really an enlightened person? So this teaching is very appropriate. And the way he's done it is to give a very practical teaching. And the Buddha is saying, if you practice this, you can verify for yourself. You can find out if I am enlightened, if the Dhamma is well proclaimed, if the Sangha is practicing the good way. So this is the point of this teaching, is really for an audience. You know, the king, the court particularly, they weren't Buddhists. They hadn't met the Buddha. And so this was a teaching where the Buddha is saying, you can verify for yourself by practicing what I teach and see if you get those results. And he's using, of course, the famous simile of the elephant's footprint. So he uses the simile that in the forest you might see an elephant's footprint. It may be very big. And, you might think, oh, this is a big tusker. This is a big elephant that's made this footprint. But the Buddha says you cannot. It's interesting. He's really impressing investigation. You cannot be sure of that. He said some of the female elephants, they have very big feet. So it may be a female elephant. And then he says you may go further in the forest and see scrapings. And the Buddha says you may think, this is a tusker, but you cannot be sure. And you may go further and see branches very high up that are broken. And again, he says you cannot be sure. And the only way you can be sure, how is that? When you actually go further into the forest, and there you see the tusker sitting below a tree, sitting in a clearing. Then you know, those footprints were the tusker's footprints. And in the same way, the Buddha goes on to teach that we do not know the Dhamma until we've seen it for ourselves. But once we've seen it for ourselves, we've seen the elephant, the Naga, we've seen the Buddha. We've realized it for ourselves. So the interesting thing with this whole sutra is that the Buddha is encouraging us not to believe easily. He says, investigate. Each of the stages where one could think, yes, the Buddha is fully enlightened. Like if one experiences jhana, for instance, these very, very deep states of meditation, great stillness, incredible happiness, bliss. But he said, no, you cannot. You cannot judge from that. You've got to go further, further and further until you see the Dhamma for yourself. So what the Buddha gave us and what the Arahant Mahinda gave us in this teaching was a very practical. It's the essence. It's the heart of training for monks and nuns in particular, but for all of us. And so I'll briefly touch on what's called the gradual training. This is a training that takes us from just hearing the Buddha's teaching, gaining faith, right to seeing the Dhamma. And a lot of these factors actually apply to our daily life, to everyone's life, regardless of whether they're monks or nuns. So the first thing, of course, is we hear the Dhamma, and the Buddha talks about that, and then we develop faith. Faith is an important motivating factor. If we don't have faith, if we don't have confidence in something, we will not do it. We will not undertake it. And we see that in our daily life. If we don't have faith in what we're doing, we won't stick to it. We won't really make a success of it. And so from this faith, which is the first factor in the 5 indriyas, we call them, it's the essential one, because what it does, when we have faith, then we get energy, then we will apply ourselves, then we will undertake the path that the Buddha is teaching. So, and he says the next thing that what happens, having gained faith, a young man, or I suppose a young woman, will ordain. But this is of course, talking about it in a monastic setting. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that. And then, having gained this faith, having ordained, then they practice sila. And that is so important. This is how we actually protect ourselves the most and protect others, is practicing sila. And in this sutra, the Arahant Mahinda, he goes into quite a lot of detail about the sila that a newly ordained monk would undertake. So of course, the essence of it, not killing living beings. And he says, being concerned for their well-being and their well-being and being harmless. This is the essence of the path, and so important. And he goes on through all of the sila, not taking what's not given, being very, very, very careful with it, and not and no sexual activity at all, brahmacharya, of course, and then no lying, no rough speech, no divisive speech, no gossip. All these things, which are so harmful in our society. These are not small things, but not small things. Samavacha, right speech, is really important. And then he goes on to talk about the other aspects of sila that we need to develop in addition to those. So this sila is so important in every person who is undertaking the gradual training, the Buddha's training. And this is why the Arahant Mahinda is teaching it. These people he's teaching, the king, maybe never heard of sila, never heard of the 5 precepts. This is more than the 5 precepts. He's talking about, 8, 10 precepts, really. So this is very important. But what comes from that next is sometimes overlooked when people look at the Buddha's teaching, but it is actually so vital, is to develop contentment, to develop that ability to be happy with what we have, to be satisfied with what we have. I call this feeling like I'm so lucky, I have enough. To have that sort of contentment is very important for practicing the path. And for the monks and nuns, it's like contentment with the robes we have, the food we have, the kutis, the dwellings we live in, the medicines we have. But it's the same for everyone. And we need that contentment. Without contentment, we're always wanting, we're always unsteady, we're always lacking, we're always needing, we're always poor. So contentment is very, very important. And then, in the gradual teaching, the Arahant Mahinda, next he mentions restraining the senses. This is when we see, hear, smell, taste and touch, but most importantly when we think, what we think about, restraining them, not allowing ourselves to go out so much. When we have this inner contentment's inside us. We don't need so much to find happiness out in the world. We don't need to find happiness through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching so much. We have what we need. Contentment, the Buddha said, is the greatest wealth. So this is what we really are looking for. And if we have some of this contentment already, if we've established it already, then we will not be so swept away by the senses. When we see some attractive person, we won't be immediately, raga won't come up, lust won't come up so much, because we know we have that happiness within. So contentment is vital for practicing restraint of the senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting and touching. And this is important, all the more important these days because of the internet. because the internet takes us out so much. And you can just see what comes up when you see certain things, when you hear certain things, the emotions that come up, the negative qualities, maybe positive qualities even that come up that are triggered by it. And we see the effect that our sense activities create for us. This is where our defilements arise. Sometimes our good qualities arise as well. But by restraining these senses, by keeping the sense of contentment, this sense of awareness of ourselves, of our own state of mind, our own emotions, then we're not swept away by them. When we see something awful, we're not greatly disturbed. When we see something wonderfully attractive, somebody who's very attractive, we're not swept away either. So this is very important for developing the path. And then the Arahant Mahinda moves on to the next stage, which is full awareness of what we're doing in daily life, full awareness and mindfulness. So this is sati sampajanya and sati. So this is like very ordinary things, going to the toilet, eating, everything we do, just to have that awareness of what we are doing, why we're doing is important too. So this is a way we can make our awareness more continuous by being engaged with what we're doing, not just letting the mind run on, rush off, not being present with what we're experiencing. So this is a very good preparation. If people want to develop the meditation, this is where they can do it in their daily life, just by bringing more presence to what we're doing, more awareness. And in reality, when we do that, it's much more enjoyable. So often you see it. People go out for dinner, or they go out for a meal, and they're so busy talking to their friends, they're not aware of what they're doing. They've paid a lot of money and they're eating this food, but they're not aware. They're talking and, just unaware of what's happening here in the present moment. So they could actually enjoy their food much more if they had this full awareness, this sati sampajanya. And then the next very important thing the Buddha talks about, and this is so important for meditation, but it's for life too, is abandoning, letting go of the pancha nivarana, the hindrances. I say to people, it's not only in meditation that these things bother us, they're bothering our lives actually. These things, of course, kama chanda, this is sensual desire, ill will, dresha or dosa in Pali, and sloth and torpor, tinamida, restlessness and worry, and doubt, vicikicca. So all these things we need to address. We need to address, particularly for the meditation, but for our lives too. Because if we reduce the sensual desire, this is usually sexual desire particularly, and if we reduce the anger, the hatred, the ill will, dresha or dosa, our lives will be so much easier and so much happier, because it's these hindrances that torture us, these hindrances that rob us of happiness. And when they are gone, then happiness, lightness, mindfulness, many good qualities come up actually, and they're very enjoyable. So having abandoned those hindrances, then a person can enter the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana. And it's only here that the Buddha says, and Arahant Mahinda repeats, that first jhana is the first footprint of the elephant, second jhana the second, and third jhana the third, and the fourth jhana the fourth. But, the Buddha says, do not think because of that the Buddha is fully enlightened, the teachings are well proclaimed, and the Sangha is practicing practicing the good way. He said, do not come to that conclusion yet. We must continue. And then having developed these jhanas, as the Buddha did on the night of his enlightenment, and after the fourth jhana, when the mind is incredibly powerful, incredibly soft and malleable, and able to look at past lives, to be directed towards past lives, then the Buddha talks about, the Arahant Mahinda talks about seeing our past lives, like the Buddha did. And when we see our past lives, it immediately makes us aware there is rebirth. This is, and I've lived so many lives. And when a person sees that, what do they see? They see, first of all, anicca, or anicca in Pali. They see the impermanence. They've been so many different people, so many different lives, so many different appearances, maybe different genders even. And what they see too is the dukkha that they experienced in those lives. They see the happiness, but they see the dukkha of it. And lastly, they see that, well, which was the real me? Which, in those lives, which is the real me? And of course, that's anatma, or anatta in Pali. So it's an incredible basis for wisdom and insight coming there. And then, of course, the next thing that the Arahant Mahinda mentions is, of course, then we see karma, the workings of karma, how people pass on and pass away and arise in a new life due to what they've done in this life, good or bad. That will determine where what their rebirth is in their next life. In actual fact, karma it determines how we experience this life too, very much. You can see that if we say something nasty or do something nasty, the results come pretty quick usually. So this is the second knowledge that a person can see in this gradual training. And the third one, and actually having seen past lives, the Buddha says, very amazingly, he says, this is another footprint of the elephant. But he said, we cannot come to the conclusion, having seen past lives, he said, you can't come to the conclusion that the Buddha is fully enlightened, that Dhamma has been well proclaimed, and that the Sangha is practicing the good way. He says you can't come to that conclusion. And even after you've seen the workings of karma, he says you can't come to that conclusion yet. And then, it's quite interesting, then when we have the third knowledge, we call this the Tevijja, which the Buddha experienced, many of the Arahants experienced it like this. They mention in their verses, in the Theragatha, and in the Therigatha, the verses of the nuns, they mention the destruction of the very deep negative qualities, sometimes called the taints in English, corruptions, the asavas. And these are the asavas of, first of all, of sensual desire, and just the asava of wanting to be, to exist at all costs. This is bhava asava. And also ignorance, not knowing how things really are, avijja asava. So these are destroyed. But interestingly then, the Buddha says, it really takes it to the maximum, really. He says, even then, you cannot be fully sure that the Buddha is fully enlightened, that the Dhamma is well proclaimed, and that the Sangha is practicing the good way. He said, you're coming to a conclusion, but you haven't arrived at it. And then he says, when one realizes after these experiences, these three experiences, that the mind is liberated, this is my last birth. There will be no more a rebirth, no more coming to existence again. He said, only then can you know for sure that the Buddha was fully enlightened, that the Dhamma is well proclaimed, and that the Sangha is practicing in a good way. So I'd like to end this short talk about Poson, the significance of Poson Poya, and how important it is for us to practice. This is how we honour, we repay, we respect the Arahant Mahinda. This is how we repay, respect and honour the Buddha, by our practice. And this is, the practice is always leading us towards the wholesome, the kusala, always leading us away from reducing the akusala, the unwholesome, the negative. So with those words, I'd like to encourage you to really do the best puja you can for the Arahant Mahinda, for the Buddha, through your practice. So I'd like to end with some gathas that everyone knows, so you're welcome to join in. Imaya Dhamma Nu Dhamma Patipattiya Buddhang Pujemi Imaya Maya Dhammanu Dhamma Patipatya Dhammang Pujemi Imaya Dhammanu Dhamma Patipatya Sanghang Pujemi Adai Maya Patipatya Jati Jara Vyadi Maranamha Parimunchi Sami. So I just translate what it means for those who may not know. It means I honor the Buddha by my practice according to the Dhamma. I honor the Dhamma by this practice according to the Dhamma. I honor the Sangha by this practice according to Dhamma. Indeed, by this practice, I will be freed from birth, old age, sickness and death. So I wish you for Poson Poya this peace and preeti, this joy that comes from practicing what the Arahant Mahinda gave us when he came over 2,000 years ago. So sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Etavata cha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang samme deva anumodantu samba sambati siddhya. Etavata cha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu samba sambati siddhya. Etavata cha amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe sattanamodantu samba sambati siddhya. Idang menyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idang menyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idang menyatinang hotu sukhita hontu nyatayo. Akasata chabumata devanaga mahindika punyang tang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata devanaga mahindika punyang tang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata devanaga mahindika punyang tang anumoditva chirang rakantu twang sada. Thank you. Thank you.